you guys feel about the government offering 2 years free community college?
I think it's a phenomenal idea, to be honest with you, especially after our country continues to fall back in education year after year, given the fact that our students are unable to pay off student debt. So there's absolutely no incentive right now whatsoever for a student our age to say, this is what I want to do in life and I'm going to pursue it because the means are there. They're being facilitated. I think people right now are looking at their 4-year plan and saying, hey, you know what? I'm better off not going to school, working, because I'm going to be, thousands of dollars in debt thereafter. So having an incentive there for free education for 2 years is wonderful.
Any thoughts, Jackson?
Yes, I feel it's a very good idea, especially when you consider what Elizabeth and Juan have said about our standing with other countries. The United States spends 14% of its government spending on education, but that ranks us 35th out of other countries. There are 34 other countries who spend greater percentages of their spending money on education. And because of that, we're ranked 20th in literacy and 18th in math overall. And so I think that that's very indicative of we're not spending enough money and that the government does have a bit of a responsibility to step up and help students pay for some college.
Under the Affordable Care Act, a patient bill of rights was created which provides protections for those with pre-existing conditions. So 129 million Americans with pre-existing conditions can no longer be denied coverage or charged more. So how do you feel about the law extending to coverage to those with pre-existing conditions?
I personally believe that it's really important for people to receive coverage for pre-existing conditions. A lot of things can be considered genetic, environmental factors that people don't necessarily have all the control over. And so having these conditions really can mess up a lot of people's health care. And coming from a nursing student, everything goes into a patient's chart and can be pulled legally if they are required to go to court or any circumstance like that. And to have certain conditions that healthcare companies will look into can cause a lot of problems for people. And I think it's the most important thing is to have health coverage for all of those individuals, and that includes people with pre-existing conditions or whatever it may be.
That would be very difficult on insurance companies, but I definitely think people have the right to health care whether or not they have a pre-existing condition. Now, for people under the age of 30, about 1 in 6 of them have a chronic illness such as asthma. And half of those people would be considered not worthy of insurance and they wouldn't be given any care. Looking down the road, if we were to allow them a way to get care, our generation would become healthier and preventative care would become more of a thing. And if we have good preventative care, then less money is spent in the future.
The United States Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that about 3.3 million people earn the federal minimum wage. The last time the minimum wage was increased was in 2007. President Obama proposed raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, but Congress has not gone forward with this. Do you think there's a need for the federal minimum wage to be raised at all?
I think that's one of those things that I go back and forth between, because I live in Louisiana and our minimum wage is $7.25. And if you multiply $7.25 times a full-time job, you making 40 hours a week, you're not making a lot of money. It's not a lot of money, especially if you have a family, and I understand that. But I also understand that if you live in Chicago or you live in Washington State, they have different minimum wages that play out for the people who live in their communities and the cost of living there. So I don't know if that should necessarily be Congress's job to regulate what that is. I don't know what I like to say I don't know what's best or how to best fix that, but I do agree that in some places it is really low, whereas in other places it's you're really generous with your minimum wage.
Personally, I'm for abolishing the federal minimum wage and letting the market take control of determining wage prices. Just because if you are to have a higher minimum wage, I know the Mobile-based Socialist Alternative, they'll advocate for the socialist $15 minimum wage. And the reality of the situation is that when you have a $15 minimum wage, employers are no longer allowed to hire people for these jobs. And if you look at things like the food service industry and fast food, it will turn to being completely automated, or they will have to lay off lots of people just because they won't be able to afford that high of a minimum wage.